Well, welcome to a production from the Harbaugh Coaching Academy. This is called Lessons from the Sidelines. And I'm married into the Harbaugh family. I'm Tom Crean. I got the best Harbaugh in Joni Crean. But today we've got one of the best coaches, one of the best leaders in football, but in my mind, in any sport, and could be successful in any sport. And we're going to jump right into it. We are very honored to have in Lessons from the Sidelines Coach Mike McCarthy. So, Mike, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Well, Tom, it's always great to get together with you, and it's awesome to be on this Harbaugh podcast. Great respect for the whole family.
Now you've shown that. I mean, your first day on the Pat McAfee show, you brought up Jack and Jackie Harbaugh when you were doing the interview. So there's great respect, and I think that's some of the stuff that we're going to get into. I think you'll see why I consider Mike a great friend, why the Harbaugh family has such great respect for Mike. When you get this short window into Mike and what he's about, and I want to start right now with where you're at. Obviously, leaving Dallas, you kept your home in Green Bay even while you were in Dallas. So you're in Green Bay, you're in Door County in Wisconsin, you've still got your home in Dallas. What has life really been like since the season ended?
I mean, it's really been great to really focus on the family. It's we stayed in Dallas until June just because our two teenage daughters wanted to finish school, and then our youngest was involved in an excellent volleyball team that actually won the national championship. So we stayed in Dallas through June. I have a lot of love for Dallas. We were in a great community down there. Prestonwood Christian Academy was the school the girls went to, and so, but Green Bay's home. It's always been home for Jessica and I and our family. So our plan was always to come back here. It was just a matter of when. So we just kind of been going back and forth between Green Bay and Door County, and Door County is it's a special place for us, and Wisconsin, the people of Wisconsin. It's been really sweet to be back here and just to get back into that mode, and so just a lot of family time, frankly.
No, that's great. We're talking this past Saturday, and you were on the water in Door County in the boat, and that's the stuff that you really never had a chance to do during this time of year. But you're getting a chance to. It's a great example of you're getting a chance to kind of re-energize, refresh, recalibrate because your energy's been high for a long time. But let me ask you this: what have you really looked at, like when you go back into being a head coach, especially in the National Football League? Are there certain things over this period of time since leaving Dallas that you've picked up or that maybe reaffirm certain things to you or things you say, you know what, I'm really going to apply this even more so when I go back to running a team again?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Really going back to 2019, I was able to get together with a group of coaches, and we put a tremendous amount of time and energy into really every aspect as I looked at as a football program, A through Z, and I still have the grease boards filled out with all the different topics and so forth from 2019. And there was it was a really detailed process, something I really enjoyed. We had 6 meetings up here in Green Bay where everybody came to town for a 3 or 4 day period. So it was really in depth. But I think just like anything, as you know, you never get to use everything
Sure.
that all your great ideas. So really coming back here just to reconnect to that process has been healthy. But I feel like the head coaching responsibility and administrative outlook on how you do things, it just kind of flows with how the league flows, and one thing in the NFL, that I realized, when I first became a head coach in '06 is just how many emails you get from the league office. So really trying to stay abreast of which direction the league is going, the emphasis, legally, the training rules, the CBA implications, all those things. So just really staying on top of that, just seeing if there's any tweaks in that throughout this year. So just be able to get that information and look at that, just make sure it's applied. But the pure football part of it is that's the part that I'm really looking forward to as far as the trends and really what you want to do. Because you know this in depth, Tom, because we talked about this at length, just the pure offensive football.
Sure.
I made a decision in 2020 when I went to Dallas to keep the original offense because I thought it benefited the path and the trajectory of Dak Prescott as a quarterback. And if I had that decision to do over again, I would not have done that. It's not that it didn't work out; it worked out great. It was fine, and I thought we were able to get to the things we wanted to. But I was in the same system of football offensively from 1989 all the way to 2020. So,
Sure.
so going back to those things and just how will what the offensive systems you'll put in from day one. So that's actually been fun. I've pulled playbooks from 2020, 2010, just different things. Just going back but also you got to watch the things that people are doing in today's NFL. So those are kind of the things I'm kicking around just from an offensive standpoint because I do feel really good about the structure, the programming, the different pods that you have to set up as a head coach, and so I have a firm grasp of how I would want to go into a new organization and implement that. But it has to fit that organization too.
Sure.
So I think you can overplan those things, and if I've ever been guilty of anything, that's definitely what I've done in the past.
Well, and we've been friends for since Marquette, and I've learned so much from you even from the beginning. But one thing that stands out as you talk about that you told me at Indiana that I know you applied and it helped make you a better play caller, a better coach, and it certainly helped me because I was such a play guy, play after play. And you have a great phrase: less volume, more creativity. And I think it's great for any coach. I think it certainly applies to basketball. I think it applies to anybody. When you think of less volume, more creativity in the present day of what you see when you're looking at new plays, when you go back and look at what you had, when you go back and look at what's worked in the past or what you're thinking about in the future, how do you apply that when there's so much information that you can gather right now? Because you're not preparing your own team for a game, you're getting to watch every team play, especially with the stuff you're doing during a week.
I'll tell you what, Tom. I think less volume, more creativity is as prominent of a coaching philosophy you have to have throughout everything that you do in today's NFL. I mean, I think the obvious, when you and I start talking about, we were talking about game planning, talking about schemes, and if you just look at the reality of the training regiments and the training opportunities that NFL coaches have with their players, the number one challenge is less time. So you have less time, and to think that you can be able to still have 150 passes in a game plan for each and every week which was the case back in the early days of the West Coast offenses in the '90s and early 2000s. That's you have to. You think you need to take a hard look at that. So that challenge really, and less volume, more creativity. How that's something that I came up with back in the early 2000s. So I think the more and more that I'm involved in today's NFL, it's really at the forefront of how can you tighten those game plans down each and every week because you only have so many reps. How you train these athletes over the course of an in season, let alone the off season and training camp, there's less time. 17 games, more stress on their bodies, less time. You have to be more conscious of the rest of recovery. So less volume, more creativity. Not only doesn't just involve how you look at a game plan each and every week, but it's also how you train the players during the course of a week, whether it's in a classroom, whether it's in the weight room, making sure the nutrition, because you have more to do, you have more resources today that are available to the NFL players, and I think the NFL, the professional athlete as a whole, they do a tremendous job of outsourcing and subcontracting other professionals to help them in their everyday needs. So that it's just you got to be really on top of your time efficiency and your workload capacity are things that I spend a lot of time, always thinking about how can I implement that into a working schedule, make that schedule better, be more productive with the time with the players because they do have the rest of recovery components and modalities that they do away from work that are it's very important for them to get through a season and frankly, as you know, and no different your sport basketball, it's a 24/7, 12-month a year operation with these.
And of all the sports, football has obviously been physicality and high level training inside of your program when it comes to on the field. Obviously, you can still lift weights, condition train, all that, but you're losing so much of that over the years. And I hear that from Jim and John all the time. Colleges are getting more time. Maybe they don't have the two-a-days. College basketball has increased their time. Every state is different in high school with the time that they have. For the people that will hear this, that either for the players that aspire to keep going up the ladder, or for the coaches that have those type of players, what are some of the key things that young players can do right now to get ready to come into an environment where it's not always going to be hands-on as physical, but get themselves really prepared to learn, all right, to pick things up in a hurry, even, because everybody talks about mental reps, right? Well, mental reps are hard. You've got to be really skilled at that. You've got to work at it. But it's really, really hard, and professional football would be the hardest, of being able to go in and really understand what's expected of you on any given position, in any given play, and any given assignment that you have.
I would say, for any young player, and I'm amazed, watching my children go through youth sports over the years and how it changes. Because having a 33-year-old and a 24 and a 22-year-old, now a 16 and 14-year-old, you've seen different generations of how these young athletes are trained. But I would say, if anything, the physical development opportunities are oversaturated. So I mean, it's our children today have so many opportunities to be trained physically. Where in our day, it was going to the playground and trying to get as many games of basketball in, and hopefully you didn't lose because you can continue to play. So, but now there's so many individual special trainers out there that these kids do have an opportunity to train year round, 7 days a week. Mentally too. I mean, when I started in the NFL, if you weren't in the meeting writing it down, you weren't getting the specifics of how to coach a certain footwork, or how to read a certain pass. Well, it's on the internet now. So I mean, so the access to mental development is so much more available than ever. So I think the mental and the physical, I think today's generation, both coaches and players, there's a lot available. I would recommend for the younger generations and the parents of these young youth youth sports participants, is the emotional development, the mental conditioning. And these kids are getting it, in high school, in college, and obviously in professional sports. But I think that's where the gold is, and that makes a difference. I think it's no different than, Jessica and I were talking about one of our kids is having an issue in one of her classes, and but also there's homecomings coming up,
Sure.
and in the old school parenting is, well, she doesn't get to go to homecoming because she doesn't get her grade up. and
You're going to
I'm,
take the keys to the car. You got to be in at
yeah,
10 rather than 11.
and I'm not taking that dress off her, that's for sure. But I just she's not gonna feel in life if she has if she has a D in biology. She's gonna have bigger struggles if she doesn't continue to develop emotionally. So she needs to go to that damn dance. Is my point. But I think those things, the emotional development, the emotional exposure, the social development of your children through sports, and it is, you see the different. I know my particular family, if the kid plays, the national AAU versus the local, when these kids get to travel, they're exposed to more. So I'm just so much more cognizant of that now, that the social development of our children is critical to their success as adults. And I think that emotional realm of mental conditioning through sports is just such a great landscape to develop, in that area.
Well, I totally agree. And here's another thing that I think about right away when you say that, because it's losing traction all the time, and that's note taking. I've seen your notebooks, I've seen your
Yeah.
office, I've seen your practice plans. John Harbaugh still takes the $1.99 spiral notebook. He has hundreds of them through the years, right? And he still takes those notebooks. Maybe he dresses up the notebook, maybe it's got a Ravens logo, but he's still walking into each meeting with a notebook, as is Jim. I know for me, even my last teams, it got harder and harder to get them to understand, to really take notes. What's your view in this continued world where everything's changing, with technology, the importance still of actually taking the notes, drawing the diagrams, drawing out your assignment, and not just relying on the technology, the video, the internet, the film?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've always been from the school, if you write it, I got it. and and obviously you're trying to do that and pay attention and stay with the meeting. It's interesting. I just had a few years back this conversation with the quarterbacks and particularly Dak Prescott, and I'm trying to remember the name of the tablet because he went out and bought everybody these tablets, but it's like an iPad, but you take the notes and go right into it. So I tried to adjust. I tried like hell, and I just couldn't get. I just don't believe in getting too far away from that yellow tablet. Because I still like to write it down on the yellow tablet, then transfer it into a notebook. It's obviously more time consuming, but I just think that the art of note taking is critical to learning. I think because when you write it yourself, there's just a different retention that goes with that, in my opinion. Dak and the quarterback group particularly were really good about that. And what I liked about it was they were able to share their notes with one another, and I just thought it really heightened the interaction of. And frankly, it's better than putting it on paper because you can't share it and you can file it, and then you can put it right with that particular game plan each and every week. So the organization of it is even a lot more efficient. So the value of note taking is still there, but I think through technology they've made it so much more attainable to organize and share with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you mentioned Dak, and we're going to get to him because not only the season that he's having, but the seasons that he had under you. And we're going to get into your quarterbacks, but I want to hit one more thing that I think is in this line that I think is so important with coaches, because I see it all the time. See it in college basketball practices. You can see it on film. Yeah, you can see it when you go see somebody recruiting in high school. It's the staff is responsible for the intensity, the enthusiasm, and they are also responsible for the details. And I know you, like I've said this numerous times. I mean, you have an incredible pulse of your football team all the time. You were very hands on with your coaches, but where do you think details, absolutely being locked into the details, being especially for the young football coaches, not the people that have been doing it for so long, where do you think that's at right now in coaching as a whole, from what you've seen in your own kids and what you see in the NFL and other people that or other sports that you've seen?
I would say, in not being critical of this generation of in NFL, I would say it's less than in the early years because, and I think it's more. So much is available, um, and we have to go so fast. You have to do more in less time, and there's more available. Because I do think that the details is where the real gold is, and as an assistant coach, your responsibility is to teach and demand, but the demand is in the details, particularly to your youngest players. I've always looked at the evaluation process of the assistant coaches, and right away when you have a postseason exit interview, they want to talk about how good they're because you give them a chance to express how they did that particular season, and how well their group did with statistics and so forth. But in my view, 60-75% of that conversation was about your younger players, because true coaching is the development of your youngest players. I mean, it's the old teaching adage: teach to the to the youngest, to the least individual in the room. And I'm just a huge believer in that. And I was always felt that that's helps any teacher really stay on top of the details and find different ways, through creative teaching to be able to touch everybody, because everybody doesn't, everybody learns a little differently too. So, but yeah, I think the details is in our game our challenge. And I go back to the early answer. I just think you have to do more in less time, and so that's where the creativity and and just in how you present to your team, how you present to the offense, how you present to the position coaches. You have to do more, and through the visual arts, it's been so cool to watch how visual arts have grown throughout the coaching industry, and the video and the ability to cut and paste and do so many different things, and but still have an old school approach, which I think we both adhere to, is the note taking. So I think having the ability to use all those combinations is critical. But yeah, the details to me is a great indicator. Is how's that coach doing with that rookie? Are those rookies making that jump on year two? Because every rookie
Sure.
player in the NFL, they all have a different starting line when they get to your club, but they have to make a jump in year two, and that's a clear reflection of your teaching culture, and it's a reflection of that position coach. that he's putting his time in that area.
You see, and I think what you said is one of the key reasons that you're so successful because you're teaching to the least in the room, the youngest in the room. And there's some coaches and there's some leaders and there's some that are very successful that they're teaching to the smartest player in the room, to the and which sometimes in turns becomes the most experienced player in the room. Well, something's going to get lost in the translation there. But on your end, let me ask you this because I think this is you've had a lot of success with this because you've had a lot of success with developing young players. I mean, your Super Bowl champion and your NFC finalists and all the teams that were so good, and even the teams you had in Dallas, where you won 12 games each year for 3 years. Those were a lot of homegrown players that you were developing players. We're seeing your development right now, Mike, with what's going on in Dallas right now with the young players that have stepped up. And certainly there's not as many injuries as you dealt with last year, but you're seeing young players that you were developing play well. What did you do, or what are the keys to keeping the room alive and alert? Whether it's the quarterback room, whether it's your offense, your defense, or your team, and still make sure the best players are getting challenged mentally, learning wise, those type of things. Because frankly, I think you're phenomenal at that, and I just love for people to hear what some of your ideas are on that.
Well, I mean, you've touched on a number of excellent things there, Tom. I think number one, and it's just like anything, when you do win a championship, and I think organizations, when they do have success as champions, they create a tradition, they create a history. And I firmly believe in trust your history, trust your tradition. And my personal one is it took 77 players to win the world championship. It took 77 players in 2010 to win that Super Bowl. And frankly, when Ted Thompson hired me in 2006, he didn't mention the fact that we were going to be the youngest team in the league for the next 5 years. But I mean, but draft and develop was something that, he believed in. And just because, he just didn't have a big appetite for veteran free agency. And so we kind of learned as we go, as we went there. And it's really been the way of the league for the last 20 years. It's a young man's game. And these players have to play. And what you're finding out is, young players have to play probably sometimes before they're quite ready. And there's years, I mean, shoot, 2024 was one of those years for me personally. We had, a number of young guys that had to play in those first 4, 5, 6 weeks because you hope for them to be able to, you get to November before you're playing your young guys. But the reality of it is your youngest players are usually playing in the most important games. That's November, December, and into January. So
absolutely. And I think, again, your history, Mike, is young teams, but also winning when you were near the top of the league in injuries. And that is what it has stood the test of time. Obviously, I mean, you've dealt with that. You've had some teams that were really healthy, but you've also kept winning when you were losing key players, especially at times in Green Bay. But the development part, was always there. And before we get into that, you brought up Green Bay again. I want to ask this question. It was so cool. I had tears in my eyes watching it happen. You all your time in Lambeau was as the head coach of the Packers or as the competitor coming in to beat the Packers. And your second to last trip, or maybe your last trip in there, you went in there as a legend. What was that like walking through that tunnel, that ovation that day when the whole place just erupted when they saw you walk out and hear your name?
it was incredible, Tom. And obviously you and I've talked about it. I didn't really know what to expect.
Sure.
I really went back. It was it was a home opener for the Packers this year versus Lions, and they have it's traditionally is alumni weekend, so they had a really nice dinner Saturday night. But they also invited all the guys back from Super Bowl 45 that were able to get back. You're getting a little older because now all your players are coaching their kids in high school, so a lot of guys couldn't come back for that particular game. But we had a great dinner Saturday night. It was a lot of fun. And they didn't really, talk about the specifics of halftime. They just told us we were going to be introduced. And so when we got down to the tunnel, they, had a group go out, and then they started sending people one by one. So I wasn't really, was anticipating anything. But boy, walking out there and just to see that crowd stand up was, whew, I mean, it
You could
just
see
it
it on
makes,
TV. It was incredible.
oh my God, it was, it definitely. Seen the video, and it never gets old. That's for sure.
Exactly.
It was an incredible moment. So I was
Well,
very,
you're
very
going to get one of
appreciative.
those in Dallas too. And speaking of Dallas, You've worked with some great coaches. I mean, we could do a series on the coaches and players, and we're going to get into a few players specifically. But the Jerry Jones that's always in the news, the Jerry Jones that's always out there, that people see at a game, that they see in an interview, that they hear on a broadcast or a radio interview, there's that Jerry Jones. What is the most misunderstood thing about the Jerry Jones that you worked for and the Jerry Jones you worked or know so well now after these years?
I think that clearly that what I think what I in my opinion is misunderstood is Jerry Jones is a football man. I mean he grew up in the game of football. He played on a national championship team in Arkansas. Played for a legendary coach. Coach Bull was there in Arkansas. So I mean the guy is all about football and has been his whole life. And that's the part that you don't really get to see as much because you have Jerry Jones, the businessman, and no one's done it better, and no one's done it better in the last 40 years. So and that's the part that I think with the public sees. And I wish he'd have told me this the day I got there, but I think it was like 2021. It was after my second year. He just said, "Hey, make sure," he said, "don't pay attention to a damn thing I say publicly." That's content, that's business. He said everything about football is about what you and I talk about, and I felt that was a really important conversation for myself as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Just the clarity on how that thing operates. So the businessman he's been great for the National Football League. He's been great for professional sports. I mean, he has moved the needle on how NFL has done financially. I mean, it's unprecedented. But what I've always enjoyed and things I will miss, I'll miss the one-on-one conversations with Jerry because he is about football. I mean, he has a tremendous love for the game of football. He was an offensive lineman, so I mean, and that's what gets lost in it. So he does have a great appreciation for the development of players, how you treat players, how they're coached. And you could feel that definitely in the football operations there in Dallas.
Well, and that brings up, speaking of letting you coach them, what you did with Dak, and we could talk about so many people, but the arc of Dak's career, you got Dak Prescott, who was pretty good. There's no doubt about that. He had already established himself in the NFL. But where you took him really every year, and especially the last couple of years, and now it's played out to the point he's playing like an MVP, and I don't think it'll surprise anybody if he wins that. What has made Dak be so successful at making strides in his game as a quarterback? In whether it's the technique, whether it's the work ethic, what are the absolute secrets to why he continues to rise at the level that he rises to?
Well, the number one most important secret is Dak the man. I mean, there's definitely people that you work with in professional sports, and you're so blessed to be a part of some of these men's lives. And but he's special. I mean, he's definitely someone that I don't know if there's ever been anybody that's ever worked with him that still today isn't still rooting for him. So I just think that speaks volume. I mean, he has an incredible story, but his give back to the community, to the family, he does. He's just has a heart of gold. He's probably the most natural leader that I've seen walk through the doors in this generation of players. So he's a special young man, and I think it's someone that I have a very high appreciation and love for. Now, as far as the quarterback development, I think we all look at the position a little differently, and he played in an excellent system under Jason Garrett and Kellen, and it was a combination of things they did schematically were excellent football. But I think just things anytime you have an opportunity to work with quarterbacks through your time, which I've always loved getting them as rookies. But there's things that you feel like you can improve on, and that was definitely the case with us. And I thought he's done a great job of developing the 3-step to 5-step. I think the Green Bay game is a great example this year. I mean, he played that game on as tight as a time clock. With Green Bay's pass rush on turf, that was definitely was going to be a big part of the challenge. But the way he got the ball out of his hand consistently, constantly distributed the football. So I mean, he's doing all the little things. He has great command, protection adjustments. I had a really nice blitz pickup I saw last week against empty pressure there against the Jets. So the details, he's on it. He's hit that level now where the game comes easy to him, and it's just really staying in tune with everybody else. He's a great mentor to the younger players. You know, does a lot of things away from football. Has the annual trip in the summer with the perimeter guys. So all the things you look for in your quarterback, A through Z, he checks every box.
Well, and I wish we could spend time on this in as far as every one of them, but we look at the quarterbacks you've been a part of. I mean, Joe Montana, Jake Delhomme, Alex Smith from the beginning. You walk into Green Bay, you've got Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers gets developed. You coach him so many years. You go into Dallas, you have Dak. I mean, you had Cooper Rush, who had to win games for. I believe he won I think he's 9-5. Now I know he lost the other day with the Ravens, but I think he might have been 9-5 if I saw that stat right going in, and when he's had to be coming in from being a backup. Your quarterback schools are famous amongst your coaches, amongst your quarterbacks. I wish we could show video of what that's all about. You do such a great job with that. But I want to ask this: if you could give advice on the 2 to 3, and you covered it with Dak, but the 2 to 3 most important attributes for a high school, college, pro, somebody that aspires to be a quarterback. Because I think when you talk about quarterback, we're going to hit somebody that could be a good basketball point guard, somebody that could be a pitcher or a catcher. We could hit a lot of different things for other sports. But what are those 2 or 3 attributes that are just they have to be there?
If I had a young son that was 5 or 6 years old, and actually we used to do this with George when he was younger, is you got to teach them the throwing mechanics, and you got to tie it to the feet, and those are 2 of the most important things that you want to see developed in a young quarterback. The younger, the better. Teach them the proper throwing mechanics. No wasted motion, and the ability to play in the pocket and out of the pocket, and that comes with the footwork. So always loved the young quarterbacks back in college when you're looking at high school kids that played multiple sports, because then you usually never had to worry about their ability, and their footwork and agility and things like that. So, but yes, the development for young quarterbacks, get the throwing motions right, and make sure they're having the ability to play in the pocket, off platform throws, because that's the position, that's the way the position's played, and you cannot do enough of it. Scramble drills, things like that, because you don't get to take 5 steps and take a nice hitch and throw from a clean pocket more than 15-20% of it of a normal game. So those are the things that the earlier you can get quarterbacks working on those specific traits, I think that's what always carries over. I think that's the first thing that, going back to when the college kids would come out, and I always like the old combine tape, because they had the same angle shot every single year, so you can do comparables. How their ball carriage is. Do they drop the ball from the ball carriage? Is the angle to the point of release, is it direct or is it looping? They always look for. Back when we were first started coaching, Tom, the old VHS, you couldn't really see the elbow
Yeah,
and
or it
shoulder
was grainy.
flexibility.
It was
Yeah,
grainy. Yeah.
yeah. So you had to really have to, get to see those guys in person. So just, get with someone that truly knows the mechanics of no waste and throwing motion, because if you can get them at a young age, and because you can work on shoulder flexibility, you can work on elbow flexibility. So, and get them feet trained that they can throw from any platform. Those are the 2 things I would start with young kids.
Where's the accuracy at for you versus the arm strength because I think it's like in baseball, and it's certainly like this in basketball. There's so many people want to start shooting with deep range rather than really master the layups and the close shots, or people want to throw really, really fast and hard rather than mastering pitches. Where are you at with that for the young quarterback? Accuracy versus arm talent, maybe.
I would say accuracy over arm talent, just because I think accuracy, in my opinion, when you look at a throwing motion, comes from the flexibility in the elbow and the shoulder. And if you do have flexibility, in the shoulders and elbow, you can increase arm strength. That's something that you can build on. So, and I think that, like anything, I've seen plenty of guys. There's been more guys that don't make it because they can throw it harder but less accurate. I think accuracy, if you got to be able to put the ball consistently where it needs to be put. So, especially in today's NFL, because you don't throw, arm strength can put you in a spot to make any throw, at any quadrant of the field. But the NFL is about throwing receivers open. So the ball placement is critical. So I would definitely go accuracy over arm strength.
When
But
you look,
when you play in Green Bay, Wisconsin, you want both.
oh
You
yeah,
know,
absolutely.
you play in Dallas, you're playing in a dome, then the accuracy is fine. So,
No, no,
but
but I think you're exactly right. I think it's so easy for people to see the result of how far they hit it, how hard they throw it, how deep they shoot it, rather than the accuracy, the fundamental of the technique. And eventually the strength comes, and then it's gonna you want the strength and the accuracy to kind of meet at the same time, so to speak, to me, especially with the range. Like you just want to keep building a young player's body and don't push him too far too early, because it's really, really, really hard to change throwing mechanics, to change shooting mechanics, especially if they start to have a little bit of success or their version of success. And it's really hard to change it. But you talked about today's NFL, and there's something that I wanted to ask you, because in coaching in basketball, I heard this great line from Dave Petromali. He's now the lacrosse coach at North Carolina, but he was a great lacrosse player, and he ran the John Hopkins program for so long. And he had a great line about training camp. He said, "If there are cracks in the foundation when you leave training camp, they will be with you all year." And I thought about that, and I always tried to make sure that we have everything covered. Well, in the NFL, and maybe in college somewhat, but in the NFL, it's much different now, right? Because you're playing into September, because your camps are shorter, there's not as much physicality. How did you deal with, because we see it all the time right now, people lose their mind after 1 week, when it comes to maybe the media or the fans. But how did you keep your team moving forward with that process that you have, and keeping that pulse of the team that you have, as you went through the early stages of September and October in this new NFL, modern NFL?
yeah, it's very difficult to really in today's NFL not to come out of training camp with a few things that, if you're being totally honest about where your team is, a few cracks. Like for example, and it's something I've always done this going back to the early Green Bay. I think I've done it my whole head coaching career. A lot of people don't believe in 9-on-7 drills, and or hard team run drills, in season. And I've always done those. I've gotten talked out of them a few times, and every time I was talked out, I regret it, because going back to what we talked about earlier, developing the youngest players on your team, those young linemen need they need the inside run footwork, and the pads, and the combination blocks and so forth. So I would always keep those kind of drills within the practice structure, and say maybe you do 10 shots on offense, 10 shots on defense. And then as the season goes on, you just be smarter with your older players, and you say, tell the older guys, hey, have communicate, which 3 reps do you need, or 2 do you need, or, you need a kick out block. You're playing against a Micah Parsons on the end or something, just make sure. But those other 60% snaps to me, were always developing the younger players, and they didn't even know it, because they just figured it was part of the regular season work. And the reality of it is too, they need live in season game prep, game reps to get ready to play in that game. Because hell, something happens at the end of the week, you could be pulling a kid up off the practice squad. So all those things. So my point is, you know, you got to stay engaged and hinged to the fundamentals of football, and it's so hard. It's, man, just be able to sit here now and watch all these injuries in the NFL, because I was always focused on my own team, but now to see it from a league perspective, it's hard to watch, and it's so easy to say, hey, we can't do this drill or we can't do that drill, but the reality of it is the bottom half of your team, from an experience standpoint, they're the ones that are going to be affected more than the guys that you're protecting. So there's a discipline in that. There's definitely a communication between your rehab and prehab staff members in the strength and conditioning and in the training room. So, because that all needs to be tied together, and the resources of GPS and how those mechanics of making sure you're keeping guys ready to go, because the development of your team never goes away. I mean,
Exactly.
that's a 365-day a year job, and to
That's the
think that you're
quote of
going
the
to,
podcast right there. And you've had some great ones, but you're exactly right. You're exactly
yeah,
right. Go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I just think I mean, it's a 365-day job, and to think that you're going to take away that mindset in season, which is, by the way, the most important time of year, is, I just don't think that, that's not the smartest choice to make.
Well, last question here, because I'd be remiss if I didn't ask it. And we've talked a lot of leadership, but one area that I think you have done such a great job in, and at your level, it's so important. But at any level, it's important. And it's not just the leadership of the entire team, and it's not just the leadership of the individual. It's having that leadership group committee that you put together, that is a selected group of guys that you bring in that really spread the message to the rest of the team. There might be conflict that might be involved in that. There might be player to player conflict. You might get some player to coach conflict, but you're dealing with a myriad of issues when you get in there. What's the template when you walk into a room and you've got your leadership group in there? How do you make sure that you walk out of there 45 minutes, an hour and a half later, knowing that everybody was heard, everybody was listened to, there was nothing that was overly filtered, and your team got better, and you got better after that meeting ended?
Yeah, that's really been a learning experience for me as a head coach, because we call it leadership council, and leadership council. And to be honest with you, Tom, I haven't had one every year, because there's times in my career in Green Bay that I didn't feel like we were really getting anything out of it, just because of and part of it was the strength of the locker room. So I mean, you were having meetings and nothing really was said. But I think the reality of it is, the leadership council was to make sure you had a clear voice in every room, every position room. But you also were always promoting everybody in the team meeting room. See, I believe every player that's all 68 of them, you're 53 on the active roster plus your practice squad. Every player has an opportunity for leadership. Because I think it's bullshit when they have to sit there and wait. Well, I had to wait till this older guy, leaves before I can now be a leader. Well, you think how much time is wasted with that. So, always encouraging young leaders, young players to grow their leadership opportunity. I mean, their leadership opportunity could be jumping first in line and doing a hell of a job in practice reps. So I've always focused on trying to create opportunities and recognize them for everybody to try to build their leadership voice, because it's all about that voice, and we all have it. It's just getting the confidence, and it all comes down to the confidence of being heard, and make sure it's all lined up. So the leadership council to me was more of a kind of an overview to kind of just try to increase
Sure.
the
Part of the
communication room to
puzzle.
room.
Just part of the
Yeah, but
puzzle.
the team part of it,
Yeah.
God, I could not encourage it, and it's a beautiful thing when you watch these guys develop. I mean, it's going on in Dallas right now. I think I feel strongly, and I've said it. Their best years are in front of them, because you got draft classes that have been stacked. They're now Jerry. They're paying these guys the second contracts. You got more second contracts that are being done more than ever that I recall, even before I got there. So, I mean, with that, it goes back to the what? Trust your tradition. My tradition is, it took me 77 players to win a Super Bowl. If I say it once, I said it 100 times. We cannot have enough good players. And you just got to keep, that's why the young development part of it is critical. And now you get these guys on their second contract. That's where the gold is. And I think 25, 26, and 27 for that particular group, I think there's some really good days ahead for the Dallas Cowboys.
There's no doubt about that, and um, I just think, obviously I'm biased because of our friendship, but when I look at how you lead, when I look at what you've done, uh, you've kind of epitomized the development and the improvement of your team, because you're always looking for different ways to make sure that you had it better. You always have the notepad or the piece of paper and the pen. You always have something to record. I've seen you might have somebody assisting you, and you might have five, six different topics going that they would add something that you thought. And I think the creative mindset that you have with the growth mindset is one of the reasons you're such a great leader. And I think you're going to do it again. I don't think there's any question about it. And then the Hall of Fame can come, because I think the Hall of
Oh,
Fame is going to come, but it's going to come after another job because I think you got another Super Bowl in you, and I sure hope you do. This has been awesome. I've been looking forward to this. I appreciate you making time for this, and I think people are going to get a ton from this. You know, we don't. The lessons from the sideline is not about the generic questions. It's about diving in. If you're going to get great minds, you might as well dive in and find out why they have those great minds. And there's nothing generic about what we're trying to do here. And there's certainly been nothing generic about your coaching. It is high level, great leader, great father, great husband, and it's just phenomenal honor to have you on here, Mike. So on behalf of the Harbaughs, on behalf of Lessons from the Sidelines, thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
well, thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me on, and I love you, brother. Talk to
You
you
too.
soon.
You too. Thanks.